and welcome to another Thursday edition of Jamaica Magazine. I am Jabertha Atkinson. On the program today, we're taking a closer look at key issues affecting everyday life, from public safety and responsible firearm use to supporting children with autism. It's all coming up after the news.
Good day, I'm Lisa Rowe and this is your JIS News for Thursday, April 16, 2026. The government is considering a new tiered fuel pricing mechanism as rising global oil prices threaten the sustainability of the current system. Energy Minister Darrell Vaz says the existing price cap, set at $4.50 per litre per week, can no longer be maintained if high prices persist. The increase in global oil prices has been driven by the ongoing tensions and conflict in the Middle East, which continue to impact international petroleum markets. Between March 12 and April 8, transport fuel prices increased by an average of $49.20 per litre. However, only $18 per litre was passed on to consumers, with the balance absorbed by Petrojam. That intervention cost the state refinery approximately $8.6 million, or between 1.3 and 1.4 billion Jamaican dollars over the period.
If elevated prices persist, if we continue the current pricing mechanism up to June 2026, it would cost the government of Jamaica 11.8 billion Jamaican dollars, which is unaffordable and unsustainable, and in fact is 2/3 of this budget year's revenue measures.
Minister Vaz says Cabinet is now reviewing a tiered pricing model that would allow fuel prices to adjust more flexibly to market conditions.
The $4.50 cap cannot be sustained. And it means that we'll have to have several different tiers of caps, probably 3, that will speak to what's happening in the market. The government of Jamaica cannot stomach $11.8 billion with all of what we have to do and the contending priorities.
In the meantime, the government is also considering a return to work-from-home arrangements as part of measures to reduce fuel consumption amid the rising global oil prices. Energy and Transport Minister Darrell Vaz says the option is among several being examined as the country responds to increasing costs driven by international developments. The work-from-home arrangement was previously implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic to limit movement and reduce the spread of the virus.
Something has to happen because the level of traffic that I'm seeing on the road doesn't show me that anybody realizes that there's a war and the price of fuel and oil is just continuing to go up and up and up.
The minister says Cabinet will deliberate on conservation measures, even as he urges Jamaicans to take personal responsibility in reducing fuel usage. Despite rising prices, he is assuring the public that there is no threat to Jamaica's energy supply, pointing to existing fuel arrangements and local refining capacity at Petrojam.
It's not a matter of not being able to buy. It's the price. So there is no need to panic. Prices moved downwards this week, but the market conditions remain volatile given continued movement in the USGC benchmark. The government will continue to closely monitor international developments, maintain a balanced approach between affordability and sustainability, and take timely and measured decisions in the best interest of the Jamaican people.
Accountability will not be sacrificed for speed as the government moves to set up the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, NARA, to lead post-Hurricane Melissa rebuilding projects. Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness gave that assurance in Parliament on Tuesday as he opened the debate on the NARA bill.
On the contrary, NARA will operate with a level of project management discipline, transparency, and public reporting that has not previously been applied to government infrastructure delivery at this scale.
Dr. Holness explained that the legislation establishes two distinct categories of projects. Pillar 1 involves approved government-led projects that NARA will be responsible for coordinating, implementing, and having direct oversight. These projects include the rebuilding of damaged infrastructure, the transformation of towns like Black River and Falmouth, construction of a new Kingston Public Hospital, development of the planned government campus at the National Heroes Circle, and the delivery of a major logistics and transformation infrastructure, including Vernon Field.
For these projects, NARA will exercise its full suite of powers: accelerated planning and approval, streamlined procurement, consolidated project management, and coordinated access to the $6.7 billion of multilateral financing.
The authority is to establish and maintain a public register of approved projects with performance indicators, reporting standards, and compliance monitoring systems. Pillar 2 will involve the private sector-led investments under the FAST Jamaica framework. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is asserting that local contractors and businesses will not be sidelined in the reconstruction program that is to come as the country rebuilds from Hurricane Melissa.
Let me be clear: local contractors, local workers, local businesses are not peripheral to this reconstruction effort. They are central to the reconstruction effort.
The Prime Minister insists that under NARA, reconstruction will strengthen Jamaican capacity.
NARA is not simply a mechanism to spend money on rebuilding. It is a mechanism to use rebuilding as a means of strengthening Jamaica's capacity, deepening domestic capability, and laying a firmer foundation for long-term growth.
Approximately 99.6% of Jamaica Public Service Company JPS customers have now had their electricity restored after the disruption caused by Hurricane Melissa last year. Hurricane Melissa made landfall on October 28, 2025, leaving thousands without power, particularly in the western parishes. Energy Minister Darrell Vaz says just over 2,700 customers remain without electricity, mainly in sections of Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth, which were hardest hit by the storm.
Between April 1st and April 13th, tangible progress was made, including the restoration of 258 customers and the substantial completion of 26 communities across the two most affected parishes. As it stands now, Westmoreland is at 92.63% with 2,561 customers out. St. Elizabeth is at 99.56 with 203 customers out.
The minister provided the update during Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing at Jamaica House. He says torrential rainfall, flooding, difficult terrain, and issues with customer readiness continue to slow restoration efforts in some areas. JPS serves nearly 700,000 customers island-wide. And finally, the government has facilitated more than 772,000 transactions since the Electronic Motor Vehicle Registration Certificate EMVRC was introduced on July 21 last year. Minister with responsibility for efficiency, innovation and digital transformation, Ambassador Audrey Marks, gave the update while addressing the media launch of the ICT Authority on Friday.
Working with the Tax Administration Jamaica and the Island Traffic Authority, we transitioned to the Electronic Motor Vehicle Registration Certificates and Digital Fitness Certificates. This has been a resounding success. The platform also has built-in features that reminds drivers when a certificate is nearing expiration and allows renewal with the click of a button.
The EMVRC is among three major achievements of the Information and Communications Technology ICT Authority, which was established in April 2025. Another is the Gov Payout System, which, in its initial rollout, supported the government's $1 billion Solidarity Program by enabling cash grants to vulnerable citizens. A third achievement is Tax Administration Jamaica's mobile app.
Through this application, citizens are now able to complete a range of tax transactions directly from their devices, including tax payments, police record applications, etc. And so far, this application has over 40,000 users and counting.
And that's it for JIS News today. I'm Lisa Rowe. Thanks for watching.
Are you living on or in possession of family land? Do you want to sell or subdivide the property? Use eLand Jamaica to search for details on the property. You can complete a title search and verify the owner before you sell the property. If your name does not appear on the title, register the land or clarify the existing title in your name before you sell. A title is a notice to the world of your ownership of land. For more information, contact the National Land Agency at 876-750-5263 or 876-946-5263. The National Land Agency, one agency, one goal to serve you better.
Recent events have once again put the spotlight on firearm use and public safety. What does the law say and what are your responsibilities? Get the facts on the Firearms Act next.
Welcome to Get the Facts, the program that provides you with information on government's policies and initiatives. I'm Theodore Henry. Establishing a framework that prohibits the illicit trading of firearms and ammunition, and distinguishing the regulation of items that are lawfully acquired and duly registered, these are the objectives of the Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulation Act 2022. A lot of information is laid out in the Act, but our able guest will break down the information clause by clause. She's Director of Corporate Communications and Client Relations at the Firearms Licensing Authority, FLA, Beverly Robinson. Welcome to the program, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, I mentioned right at the start there are two of the major goals of this new Act, or this updated Act. Are there any other goals of it? Apart from?
Well, to allow for a framework for the efficient, would say, management of the private firearm industry in Jamaica.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so let's jump into the clauses. I'm sure you would recommend that everybody reads the thing for themselves.
Yes, we all need to read it.
All right, well, let me ask you some specific things. Now, Part 2 of the Act looks at the prohibitions in respect of firearms and ammunitions. What are some of the key changes in this area?
There are issues such as stockpiling. So you're not allowed to stockpile neither ammunition nor firearms.
Okay.
And if you do, then the penalty is going to be life imprisonment.
As a private citizen.
Right. The discharge of your weapon must only be in protection of yourself or your personal property, or in protection of someone else and their personal property, or in the unusual case that you're protecting your property from a trespassing animal. Therefore, gun salutes are an offense.
Christmas time.
Right. And I mean, for events, we have this habit, some firearm license holders and illegal firearm license holders of celebrating with their firearms. And the sanctions, the penalties are very, very harsh, and it is an offense. There is also a tendency during special times of the year when we celebrate special events for people to attend events, and nobody's too sure who has the licensed firearm. It's probably with a brother, or it is probably secured in some container somewhere. That is illegal, and it's an offense.
What's the legal way of going about that?
Your firearm, the Act specifically states where your firearm should be stored at all times.
Okay.
So it must either be in a holster on your person, in a safe at your home, and the word safe is the operative word, not in the drawer underneath the bed, or underneath the mattress.
Safe.
Right. Or with the FLA, or with a police station. So anywhere else it is placed, you're committing an offense.
You had mentioned not with a brother. The holster has to be
on you. Right.
The license.
Right.
Understood.
And if your firearm is lost or stolen, then the duty is on you to report it to the police the minute you discover that it is lost or stolen.
We're going to talk.
On the other hand, if you find a firearm, then you come in possession of a firearm by whatever reason, then your duty, that's a duty on you, whether you are a license holder or if it's not your firearm and you're a license holder, then you have a duty to report it to the police. You may be a medical person who is on a scene and you get in contact. Your duty is to report it to the police. And if you're a fireman, your duty is to report it to the police.
You said duty.
It is a duty.
So there are legal ramifications.
Yes, in the Act, it is clearly defined as a duty.
All right. Is there a final word you'd like to share with our viewers?
Just to urge everyone to think safety, or licensed firearm holders to think safety. We know we're coming up to the festive season. We know that, people have been under COVID restrictions for 2 consecutive Christmases, and we know there'll be overwhelming euphoria.
Oh boy.
And we're just encouraging license holders to think safety first, to be aware of their duties under the Act, and also the penalties, if we break the law.
This has been Get the Facts. Our guest has been Director of Corporate Communications and Client Relations at the Firearms Licensing Authority, FLA, Beverly Robinson. Thank you for watching. And until next time, I'm Theodore Henry. Take good care.
When you think of Jamaica, the first thing that comes to mind is the people. But what is it about us? What makes us truly Jamaican? Is it our warmth and hospitality? The way we greet each other with a simple wagwan or a bright smile? Maybe it's our resilience, our ability to find joy even in tough times. Or perhaps it's the unmistakable sound of patois connecting us, adding flavor to every conversation. Speaking of flavor, could it be our love for street food? The pan chicken sizzling on the grill, the soup men on the corner, the fruit vendors with their fresh, vibrant offerings? Wait, I know you're excited, but what about our music, our dance moves, or rhythm that captivates the world? We are storytellers, whether through folklore or everyday conversations. Being Jamaican is more than just a nationality. It's a feeling, a culture, a way of life. From the way we speak to the way we dance, cook, and connect, every part of our identity reflects our rich heritage and unstoppable spirit. So what makes us truly Jamaican? It's everything. We are the culture, the energy, and the heartbeat of the island. Autistic children often require tailored support and structured routines, especially in school. Up next, we take a closer look at how the education system is equipped to provide that support and why early detection makes all the difference.
There's much more to educating our children than confining them to textbooks or curricula. Every child has their learning style, and sometimes it's made difficult when it's compounded with a learning disorder. Hello, I'm Carrie Ann Smith. The number of diagnosed cases of autism in Jamaica is on the increase, and the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information is tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that provisions are in place to facilitate the learning of these students. With me is Acting Assistant Chief Education Officer in the Special Education Unit in the Ministry, Mrs. Ann Newman. Welcome.
Thank you, Kerry.
All right, so let's get into it. What are the numbers as it relates to the increase in autism in schools?
Okay, the Center for Disease Control in the United States suggests that there's a ratio of 1 in every 6 to 8 births. When that is applied to a Jamaican birth rate in Jamaica, it means that as many as 500 odd students or children could be born with autism.
Okay.
And it is skewed towards boys, so the ratio is 4 to 1.
All right, before we even get into exploring the issue, what is autism?
Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disorder that's usually diagnosed by age 4. Children with autism or who are on the spectrum usually manifest some disorders in communication, social disorders, and very often have behavioral disorders.
So how is the ministry handling the cases in schools?
Well, for the cases that come to our attention, because remember that we now have a passbook that's monitored in the Early Childhood Commission years. So students coming over to main ministry would travel with their passbook, and hopefully by that time, at age 6, they would have been diagnosed. Unfortunately, some students have fell through the cracks and are not diagnosed as early. So once they're brought to our attention and there is a diagnosis, then we can do the appropriate placement. Remember I said it's a spectrum disorder, so some children have a mild case and some children more moderate or severe. Students who are on the spectrum need different interventions. So depending on the severity of the diagnosis, whether it's mild, moderate or severe, they are placed in the appropriate settings. Students with mild autism usually are educated in the mainstream, whereas others who are severe or in the moderate range are educated in our special schools.
Okay, so it's important for them to be diagnosed early.
Critical. Early diagnosis and intervention is the key to the measure of success we have.
Right, so now that you're talking, it seems to me it's a holistic approach, because parents need to ensure that if it is that they're seeing any of these signs, that they get their children tested.
Parents need to remember that they're usually their child's first teacher, and they need to follow their instinct, and wherever they have reason to be suspicious that something could not be quite so right, it is their responsibility to seek professional advice and assistance.
All right. So what are the programs or intervention strategies that are in place to ensure that these children are not lost in the system?
Okay, again, we go back to early intervention. Right. Once students are diagnosed, then it is the responsibility of the parents, and if they're in a school program, early childhood, or wherever they may be on the continuum, it is the responsibility of the system to make the appropriate referrals. Persons can come to ministry at any time, the special education unit, for us to advise and help with placement of students.
I know that the ministry promotes an inclusive, integrated system. Are the schools prepared for this?
There is some measure of preparedness. Since 2005, all teachers in Teachers College were exposed to an introductory course in exceptionalities. This course really is just a cursory course, and it means that teachers in the regular system should be able to detect and have reasons to suspect that if a child is not developing along the normal path, and suggest to parents that they have the child assessed. Once the assessment is done and the diagnosis is made, you'll get a fulsome report that gives recommendations as to the way where the child should be educated and programs that the child will need, support programs that the child will need. In addition to the training of teachers, we now have special needs coordinators who work with the regular schools that will develop and present workshops depending on the needs in the school. And those children who are in the mainstream can be educated by specially trained special educators in pull-out classes or self-contained classes.
Okay, and how should we treat these children? You know, many times we label them as just rude, out of order. How should we even react to them?
Well, first of all, it needs an understanding. And sometimes we are not as sympathetic as we ought to be. But the first thing is, if we give unconditional love, then we will see that children who may act outside of what we consider the norm are actually having some difficulty. And we need to just be empathetic to their parents, not label them.
Thank you so much. But before we go, can you just leave us with a few tips, parents, teachers, as to how we can deal with children with autism?
I can't overemphasize. Early intervention is the best. And I would also recommend to parents, once a child has been diagnosed to be on the spectrum, that they join a support group. There's a Jamaica Autism support group, and just to get feedback and support from other parents who are in a similar situation cuts the journey in half. And to teachers, seek more information. There's always, as a professional, we always need to develop and grow. There's a lot of information on the net. Seek more information. It will make you a better professional.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Newman.
My pleasure.
Hi, hello. Yes, you come. Make we talk. You see, what I want to know is what happened to some of the manners. You see, as a proud country girl with born and grew at St. Mary, I grew with manners and respect. I was taught to say, hi, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. So I don't know what to somehow make it seem like having common courtesy a bad something. What if you have to drop down? You expect the man where just walk past of it, turn around and help you? Have a little brought up some man, but on a serious note though. Having manners and respect is more than just speaking words to people. It's a core pillar of Jamaican culture that's rooted deep in how our grandparents and older relatives raised us. It defines a person's character and implies more than just politeness. It proves that you were raised well, or you simply know better, so you do better. Good manners are free. Let us embrace being true Jamaicans by having good manners.
That brings us to the end of today's edition of Jamaica Magazine. You can stay connected with us online at jis.gov.jm and on our social media platforms. On behalf of the entire production team here at the JIS, I'm Jabertha Atkinson. Thanks for watching.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.